Alright, what's going on, guys? It finally happened. We just got our very first look at the Elden Ring DLC gameplay trailer, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. There is so much jam-packed into this 3-minute trailer, more than we can even begin to comprehend. But today we're going to attempt to do our best and break this down. So I'm gonna let the trailer play through one time. It's about 3 minutes long, so you can skip ahead if you've already seen it, which I'm sure you have. But as we get into it, subscribe if you're new around here, and let's take a quick watch.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
In that forsaken place, blood must spill. Blood of your fellows. The Erdtree faithful.
They were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
I presume you, too, are keen to know just what kind Mikola is doing here.
Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Vesper's flame.
Come now, touch the withered arm, and travel to the realm of shadow. I will not be far behind. May we meet again.
To begin our breakdown, let me read you the official description from Bandai Namco. The Land of Shadow, a place obscured by the Erdtree, where the goddess Marika first set foot. A land purged in an unsung battle, set ablaze by Messmer's flame. It was to this land that Mikola departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, of all things golden. The trailer opens up with a shot of a character in the Moog arena, and this confirms that the way we'll access the DLC is by touching Mikola's hand. And this was the most popular fan theory, so it's nice to know that turned out to be correct. The dialogue during this part says, "Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying." And this is in reference to Mikola, who is described by Melania as the most fearsome Empyrean, and described in the description of the Bewitching Branch to compel affection. Now we don't know who's speaking here, but if I had to guess, I would think it's a cut NPC named Raiko, who would have had a quest involving tracking down Mikola that would end in Moog's arena, but that's purely a guess on my part. The trailer then cuts to a shot of the player riding Torrent through this new shadow world, where we can see lots of broken architecture and a big city in the background, reminding me a lot of a twisted combination between Liurnia and Altus Plateau. We see many of these ghost graves that we've talked about at length in our breakdowns of the image, but if you look closely in the background, you can see the location the player can pick up a map. But then we get this really awesome shot looking over the new Erdtree, and there's a lot to discuss here. First of all, the area looks very similar to the lake facing cliffs in Liurnia. There was a lot of speculation that we may be playing playing in an alternate version of the areas we currently have, and I think there could be some evidence for that. But take a look at this shot of the Erdtree. We know from the DLC image we received a long time ago that this is the Erdtree without its color, with a second tree wrapping around it. And we can see these invisible streams falling off of it, very similar to what we see in the Queen's bedchamber in Leyndell. Given that this place is said to be where Marika first stepped foot, perhaps her bedchamber is designed after this. The trailer then cuts to a shot of the player inspecting this magic sigil, which looks very similar to a rune, although I don't want to jump to any conclusions here. We then get a shot of what appears to be a new NPC with a sword that I am absolutely going to have to get, but there's a few motifs to take a look at here. Firstly, the face on his helmet is similar to one that will come up again later in the trailer, and the swirls on the guard of the blade remind me a lot of the St. Trina's torch, and we'll see more like this again throughout the trailer. We then get a shot of another NPC in heavy armor leaning over a pot, and a voice says in the background, "In that forsaken place, blood must spill." The next character shown is lying face down in a field of purple flowers, and the mask we can see on their face again is very similar to what we saw in the first NPC. Now the flowers here in the color purple are important. In Elden Ring, purple signifies sleep, and we can see several Trina's lilies in the background, all of which tie into St. Trina, the alter ego of Mikola. The next shot is of this cathedral with a ruined interior, purple torches hanging from the ceiling, and many empty bird cages. The player approaches an NPC sitting on a throne, and a voice in the trailer says, "The blood of your fellows, the Erdtree faithful." And keep in mind the color blue that we can see throughout this area. And this character does look eerily similar to the man we can see on much of Carian imagery, so he may have close ties to them, which would explain the blue theme going on. We then get a shot of the player riding through a swamp, and yes, poison swamps are confirmed, but take a look at what the player's wearing here. It's almost like two black wings that are flapping with each of Torrent's stride. We then see a painting of an old man and a woman who's holding her belly as if she's pregnant, but look at the brooch that's holding his cloak in place. We once again see those same swirls, very reminiscent of St. Trina's torch. But we'll come back to this painting in a bit. The next shot is of the player walking through a cave with many hanging pots, and these are Erdtree pots that we can see in the Lands Between and the Warrior Jars, different from what we saw the NPC leaning over earlier in the trailer. And do note that this area is blue, much like the cathedral we talked about earlier. We get more lava areas, which could be a dungeon or hero's grave, and then a beautiful shot of the city in front of the Erdtree, which looks absolutely massive, but do note that at the very top, we can see stones floating upward, much like what we see in Farum Azula, so there may be some time shenanigans going on here. We then get to a shot of combat with this golem, which is a big amalgamation of cages, ropes, people stuck inside, even a horse hanging out on its hip. But more importantly, let's look at the face on this thing. We see a similar mask like we talked about earlier, the same looping motif like St. Trina's torch, and then omen horns sticking out in all angles. And those will come up again, so the theme to keep in mind here is the Crucible. We then see this leech creature catch the player in a grab attack. Note again the blue color and the moon in the background. But then we see one of the first main bosses, at least I believe. A play on the sort of Chinese lion, with many people under a cloth in the head of a lion, sprouting omen horns all over, and wielding yellow lightning. And you can see that one of the people under the cloth actually grabs the lightning. There's lots of Crucible iconography going on here, but we can also see this fight taking place in the swamp area, which will come up again. We then get our first look at the DLC's main villain, and his name is Mesmer the Impaler. And we have a few things to note about him. Firstly, he's covered in a snake, and has the image of a snake on his helmet. Snakes in Elden Ring are the image of the enemy of the Erdtree, and the fact that he's using thorn magic suggests that the Erdtree views him as a sinner. We can also see wings of dragons along his cloak, who were also at war with the Erdtree at one point, so it seems Mesmer here embodies pretty much everything that goes against the Erdtree and the royal family of Leyndell. We can also see he has red hair and yellow snake eyes, which is very interesting and could have other implications. And the dialogue that accompanies this part is, "Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?" And we don't know who his mother is. It would be a leap and assumption to say Marika, but given the red hair and gold eyes, it's certainly possible. We then go on to see a montage of action shots, this time seeing the player wield a pair of new straight swords with a unique Ash of War, then a shot of a thief build throwing daggers against this spirit enemy in an area characterized by purple and smoke. I'm guessing this is some sort of gravesite. We then get a beautiful shot of a new incantation, where the player floats up into the air and spins, summoning butterflies in the area that explode and put all the enemies to sleep. But looking at the statues in the background, we can see lions with horns, and then a tree growing out of this altar. Then we get a sick shot of the character doing martial arts against this night boss that wields a twin blade, although I can't see a weapon in the player's hand, so I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work, but we can see the yellow fog in the door, telling us that this knight is a boss, and the banners on the castle wall are black and blue, unlike any other faction we currently know of. Then we see a player throwing this gigantic bomb at a group of enemies, and I don't know how that's going to work, but they are adding 8 new types of weapons, so maybe this is one of them. Then we see this new enemy or player with the coolest armor I've ever seen, firing an automatic crossbow with around 10 bolts, with a big greatsword on his back, totally not a guts build at all. Then we see a player in a heavy armor set using a new bear type incantation, similar to Grail's Roar, but with this orange horned bear instead. We then see the player fighting this enemy in this beautiful blue field, using the weapons we saw earlier in the trailer, but this enemy reminds me a lot of the blue dancer charm. Perhaps this is a red dancer. We then see a new type of rider enemy, looking like a reskin of the draconic tree sentinel, riding on the back of an armored pig, and using gravity magic on a big lance. Again, this ties back to the Crucible theme, which is characterized by beasts, which ties in with this next creature we see, a big rhino, that uses this spell that summons roots, which we can see that the player eventually gets access to over on the Steam page. After that, we see this skeletal figure riding a white horse that's coming out of the water, taking place again in that purple smoky area, and as I mentioned, purple is associated with spirits, death, and sleep. We then see this man covered in a yellow cloak, attempting to pull this golden spike out of himself, but what you may not have noticed is that this is the man from the painting we saw earlier. He has the same hair, the same yellow cloak, and the same brooch holding it together. We then get a long action sequence of the player facing off against Mesmer, who summons a lot of spears out of the ground and blasts the player with fire, but take a look at what the player is wielding. It's almost like a mix between a shield and a twin blade, which can make for some very interesting movesets, but overall this looks like an awesome fight. But the trailer then ends with our first view of Mikola himself, exuding this orange light and pointing up at the distorted Erdtree. And we have one very interesting observation here. The branches on this Erdtree are pale white, very similar to what we see in the Age of Duskborn ending. So make of that what you will. But those are the details I could find in the trailer. We have a few more things from an interview with Miyazaki, where he states that there are over 10 new bosses, 8 new weapon types, a poison swamp, of course, and at least one boss that is as hard if not harder than Melania. Now the DLC will be releasing on June 21st. Pretty long wait, but nothing compared to the 2 years we've waited so far. But let me know all your thoughts about the trailer down in the comment section below. But before I go, I have started a Patreon alongside my brother called The Strength Build, where we want to offer digital personal training. Outside of gaming, my biggest passion is fitness, so if you want to get in shape and get jacked and run a real life strength build, pop over using the link down in the description below. But with all that, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here, and I will catch you in the next one.